So let's bring in here one of the drivers of those future wage rises. Daniel Walton is the National Secretary of the Australian Workers' Union. Now, Dan, can I just start by asking, there has to be a question of just how far wages can rise in future. Surely it's better to have full employment than to have everybody getting above par pay rises.
I think it's pretty remarkable, to be honest, Ross. I think if you were to make a prediction at the start of the election campaign to say on what battleground do you want to be playing, if you had a choice of putting up wages for the Labor Party, you would say absolutely. I find it quite remarkable the Prime Minister wants to dance around in this space. And the reason for that is in every piece of polling that's done, internal polling for both major parties, if you look in terms of internal polling for us and our union, or if you look at it in terms of public polling, cost of living comes up as number one. It's the single biggest issue that's affecting Australians right across the board. So when we've got those issues that are playing in place, rightly so, a lot of Australians are talking about how do they keep up with the cost of living pressures around the country. And a large part of that is making sure they get a fair and equal pay rise. And that's not been happening for quite a while. That's not been happening for multiple years. And it's not just a view held by the trade union movement. It's obviously something that's been spoken about quite widely through the RBA and through a whole lot of other academics who said that Australians deserve a fair pay rise.
Now, look, I agree entirely with that. Everybody deserves to try and keep up with the cost of living. Some people say take a second job to cope. But what really worries me about this is the future and whether employers make a choice. Small employers say in particular about whether they can actually afford to keep on workers. As I say, surely a person earning some money is better than the person being unemployed.
Of course, but Ross, I'll give you some reassurance here. So number one, right now where we sit as a nation, wages as a share of our national GDP is at the lowest level it has ever been since we started tracking back in 1959. And at the same time, profits are at the highest level as a share of GDP that they've ever been on record. This isn't about going back to the inflationary periods of bygone eras. The environment is fundamentally different. Couple that with the fact that productivity has continued to rise year after year after year. There is a fundamental misstep in our economy now in that there are people making money, there is businesses making money, and that has not flowed into the back pockets of workers. And at the same time, I find it an oversimplistic argument being put out by some that all small businesses can't afford to pass on a pay rise. Our members work in small business, they work in medium businesses, large businesses, and there are very profitable parts of the economy. I think it is an oversimplistic to say that if there is a wage rise and the amount that we're talking about for minimum wage holders, like for minimum wage earners, is a pretty minute increase, that somehow that is going to completely bust the economy, I think is quite dangerous a comment to make, because the lived experience for so many people and workers right around the country is that the pandemic's been tough. But before the pandemic, during the pandemic, productivity has gone up by and large. Businesses are making some money, but none of that money has flowed into hardworking, ordinary Australians' pockets.
So, OK, can we take the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg? He said that if a person wants a pay rise, they've always got the option of changing jobs. And given the fact that the workforce is pretty fluid right now, people are prepared to move around to get a better deal. Isn't that surely one of the answers?
Absolutely not. I think the Treasurer is fundamentally out of step with what most working people want. They don't want to say, or if I don't get a minute increase to the minimum wage, I'm going to pack my bags and leave. The reality is, Ross, if we subscribe to that view, you think about all the training and development costs, you think about the loyalty that's been built up for all of those hardworking employees in multiple businesses. It's a complete madness, complete mad proposition to say just up and leave and go find another job. What's been spoken about here is a small increase to the minimum wage. And what's being proposed by the ACTU, which we are fundamentally supporting, is a 5.5% increase. Right now, inflation sits at 5.1%. It is forecast to go to 5.5% and then to 6%. What we know is we're talking about the difference between being suggested of 3% and the 5% is a dollar difference. We're arguing over a very small amount which will provide a meaningful contribution for hardworking Australians who, in turn, will more than likely spend that money back into the economy. I think right now the Treasurer is more focused on trying to protect his backside and his own seat. But if he stepped out of Kooyong, which he's not done for several weeks, and if he went to go around to a lot of Western suburb seats and start engaging with workers in those areas, he would hear firsthand how much they are struggling with cost of living pressures in this country.
But what also worries me is the inflationary impact, not just of rising prices, but also of rising wages. Ultimately, that puts pressure on the Reserve Bank to raise interest rates even faster than is anticipated. Now, that also has the potential, if they don't get it right, of harming Australia's economy, of harming businesses, and therefore harming the employment prospects of many Australians.
Absolutely, but at the same time, cost of fuel is going up. The cost of groceries are going up. The general costs of everyday Australians continue to go up. Profits have gone up. The only thing that is not going up is workers' wages. And at the same time, they are more productive. Productivity has continued to go up. And as I said, that share is not flowing back to hard-working Australians. What is being proposed here is not an exorbitant wage rise. Inflation is tracking at over 5.1% right now. All we are suggesting is that Australians keep up with the cost of living. I think it was in fact the RBA who said that wage increases should sit at inflation plus 1%. They are forecasting, regardless of any wage increases, that inflation is going to step up. What we do know though is there is some room in our economy where that distribution and share of wealth has been flowing one way. This is not about fundamentally rewriting the system. This is just about a small and modest increase for fair-minded, hard-working Australians to get that uplift to the minimum wage.
Can I be quite specific here? Because, of course, part of the argument in the past week, the argy-bargy, if you like, has been about, whether this 5.5% pay rise that you're claiming is for the minimum wage. But what about for the overall workforce? Because there's obviously going to be a whole bunch of enterprise bargaining agreements that will come up in the next 12 months as well.
Absolutely, and our experience, which I can speak firsthand on that, Ross, is enterprise bargaining will essentially mean that we're sitting down workplace to workplace to try and negotiate fair and equitable wage rises. As I said before, there are some big parts of the economy that have been performing exceptionally well. Right now, for our construction products businesses, so if you think about it in terms of steel, aluminium, glass, concrete, cement, etc., those businesses have had record profits over the last couple of years. So the conversation with them is very different. Conversations that we have with our members who work in the mining industry or in oil and gas, where we've had record prices for our commodities, be it obviously iron ore, coal, coking coal, are sitting at record highs. Those conversations, again, where businesses are performing exceptionally well. Smaller businesses that operate in construction of doors and construction of windows, they have been doing particularly well. Those are the areas where our union operates and a whole lot of others, and they've seen bumper times. Our agriculture industry, we've had absolutely record wheat prices going through and grain prices and wheat harvests. The conditions on the East Coast have been amazing for those producers. They have been doing particularly well. As I said before, this is an oversimplistic view to say that one change in the minimum wage is going to send every small business bust. That proposition essentially means they don't understand the economy, they don't understand how Australian workplaces operate, they don't understand how enterprise bargaining operates. There is a chance here to provide a fair and equitable wage rise. If now is not the right time to ask for a wage rise, we should just be honest with ourselves and say that there will never be the right time to ask for a wage rise.
Dan Walton, as always, many thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ross.